the small town of Windermere, the night was shrouded in mist, with an oppressive gray sky overhead. Rain tapped persistently against windows, creating a rhythmic, almost hypnotic pattern. The old post office, a relic from another era, stood at the heart of the town, its doors long closed and windows boarded up. Suddenly, the stillness of the night was broken by a series of urgent rings emanating from within the post office. The town's residents, already uneasy due to the inclement weather, felt a collective shiver. Whispers of ghosts and supernatural occurrences quickly spread among them. Windermere was a town perpetually wrapped in fog, as if nature itself was intent on concealing its secrets. The streets were narrow and winding, lined with old Victorian-style houses. Rainwater collected in puddles along the cobblestone roads, reflecting the dim streetlights. The old post office, covered in dust and cobwebs, stood as a monument to neglect. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and decay, mingling with an indefinable, sweet odor of rot. It felt as though the very walls were watching, and the creaking floorboards seemed to echo whispers from the past. Emily Turner, a young and ambitious reporter from the city, had recently moved to Windermere. Her bright eyes and determined spirit set her apart from the more reserved townsfolk. The mystery of the old post office and the unexplained ringing intrigued her. With a passion for uncovering the truth, she saw this as the perfect story to investigate. Her colleague Tom Lawson, an experienced photographer with a rugged charm, had covered many strange stories in his career. Drawn by Emily's enthusiasm and the potential for a gripping tale, he agreed to join her in the investigation. Emily and Tom met at the local diner to plan their expedition. They gathered their equipment: high-powered flashlights, cameras, voice recorders, and a few basic tools. Emily's notepad was filled with questions and observations. Despite the warnings from the townsfolk, whose superstitions ran deep, their resolve was unwavering. The rain had lessened, but the fog was thicker than ever, swirling around them as they approached the old post office at dusk. As Emily and Tom stood before the imposing structure, they noticed the door was slightly ajar, creaking as it swayed in the wind. They exchanged a look of determination before stepping inside. The interior was even more decrepit than they had imagined. Dust motes floated in the air, illuminated by their flashlight beams. The silence was almost tangible, pressing in on them from all sides. Every step they took was met with the groan of old wood, and the musty smell of decay was overpowering. The atmosphere was thick with unease, as if the building itself was holding its breath. In the center of the main room stood an old wooden desk, covered in a thick layer of dust. On it lay a single envelope, yellowed with age, with the words "Midnight Bell" scrawled in a shaky hand. Emily carefully opened the letter, her fingers trembling slightly. Inside was a cryptic message, written in an old-fashioned script, hinting at secrets buried deep within the post office. The message was both a warning and an invitation, fueling their curiosity even further. They realized that this investigation would be more dangerous than they had initially thought. While exploring the dark corners of the post office, Tom accidentally triggered a hidden mechanism behind a stack of old boxes. The floor beneath them began to descend slowly, revealing a secret passageway to an underground chamber. The sound of grinding gears echoed through the silent building, adding to the eerie atmosphere. As they descended into the darkness, their flashlights barely piercing the thick gloom, they felt a growing sense of foreboding. The air grew colder, and the feeling of being watched intensified. The descent seemed to last forever, each moment stretching out in their minds. The underground chamber was vast and filled with ancient documents, vials of strange liquids, and dusty equipment. It was clear that this place had once been a laboratory. Emily and Tom found journals detailing experiments aimed at creating an elixir of immortality. The journals were filled with notes on failed experiments, desperate scribblings, and increasingly unhinged rants. It became evident that the scientist had been driven mad by his obsession. The final entries hinted at a terrible transformation, and Emily and Tom felt a chill as they realized the implications. This was not just a scientific endeavor, it was a descent into madness. Among the documents was a diary that told a chilling story. The post office had been a front for a secret lab where a scientist, driven by grief and a desire to conquer death, sought to create an immortality serum. The final experiment, conducted on himself, had catastrophic results. Transformed into a vampire, the scientist had cursed the place and everyone involved. His thirst for revenge was insatiable, and his once brilliant mind had become twisted and malevolent. The diary's final entry was a plea for help, a desperate cry from a man who was no longer human. As Emily and Tom delved deeper into the chamber, they felt a presence watching them. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to move on their own. Suddenly, the vampire, a ghastly figure with pale skin, glowing red eyes, and a twisted smile, emerged from the darkness. His appearance was both mesmerizing and horrifying. A fierce battle ensued, the confined space amplifying their fear and desperation. Using their wits and the tools they had brought, they managed to fend off the creature, but not without sustaining injuries. The encounter left them shaken and more determined than ever to end this nightmare. Realizing the vampire was tied to the post office, Emily and Tom knew they had to destroy it to end his reign of terror. They gathered materials to create an explosion, using the old equipment and chemicals they found. As they set the charges, the vampire attacked once more, his rage and power even more formidable. The fight was brutal, with both sides sustaining heavy blows, but Emily and Tom's determination and resourcefulness gave them the upper hand. They managed to ignite the fuse and escape just in time, the explosion lighting up the night sky and echoing through the town. The old post office exploded in a fiery blaze, the sound reverberating through the quiet town. Emily and Tom watched from a safe distance, their faces illuminated by the flames. They had freed the town from the vampire's curse, but the experience had left them deeply scarred. The townsfolk hailed them as heroes, and the story of their bravery spread quickly. However, the memories of what they had seen and done haunted them. The ruins of the post office stood as a stark reminder of the horrors that had once lurked within. In the months that followed, Emily wrote a series of articles about their experience, bringing to light the dark history of the post office. Her words captivated readers, and Tom's photographs added a haunting visual narrative. The town of Windermere began to recover, slowly shedding its reputation for being haunted. New businesses opened, and the community started to thrive once more. Despite their success, Emily and Tom knew that some secrets are best left buried. The midnight bell, now a symbol of their harrowing adventure, would forever remain a part of their memories.